Shalom, I'm Rabbi Art Levine. Today is February 25th, 2012, the 2nd of Adar, 5772. And we're assembled in my home in Fullerton, California. And this is the first inaugural class of what I'm calling Opening the Jewish Treasure Chest, the Siddur. So thank you, friends, for coming. We don't have anybody yet on conference call with us, but I'm recording it so that people can call in later if they wish and listen to it. And I'm hoping to post both the audio recording and the video recording on my website and or on the internet. So, and then in the future you will be able to access them if you wish. So as you know, I think you know, I've been interested in we have another member who showed up there.
Oh, that's adorable.
His name is Peter. Anyway, so back in rabbinical school, one of my teachers said, if you teach Torah, the place to start is with liturgy. And I thought, well, that's nice, but I don't know how many people are really interested in studying liturgy. But it turns out, I learned that the Siddur contains so much history and so much philosophy and has so many variety of sources that it's a wonderful platform for learning about Judaism and Torah. And I think most of us here have been studying Torah for many years, and it gets into all different kinds of discussions about whatever's on our mind. Mm-hmm. And that's one platform. We read something in Torah, and then it's like surfing the web, I guess. It expands. And the same, I'm sure, will be true as we get into this. Would you like to introduce yourselves, or should I just say who's here with us? People know? Okay. I tell you, why don't I'll go ahead and toggle the camera so that people can see. Actually, I'm going to pick this up, and I apologize for everybody who is watching on the video. This is a new technique for me, so I have to learn how to do it. But I'm going to turn this around, and would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Carol Irwin, and I know this group. They're a charming, wonderful group. So, hi everyone. Hi group.
My name is Marilyn Wasserman.
Val Wasserman.
Marilyn Spielberg.
Richard Spielberg.
Carol Rubin.
Howard Rubin.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I have some materials prepared, but I really would like to have as much of a sort of a free-flowing conversation as we can. As you know, those of you who've been in classes with me before, you know I like to start with blessings, and since we're going to be talking about prayers and blessings, that seems like a great place to start. So I prepared the little longer version. Those of you who have been in Torah study are probably used to saying the first sentence. But I thought there's a little longer version, and I thought we could start with that. So if you're comfortable with the Hebrew, let's say it together, and then we'll read the English together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'ha'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael v'niyeh anachnu v'tze'etzaenu v'tze'etzae amcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratcha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai hamlamed Torah le'amo Yisrael. Let's read it in English. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the world, who sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to engage in words of Torah. Please, Adonai, our God, make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouth of your people, the house of Israel. that we and our descendants and the descendants of your people, the house of Israel, all of us, know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to his people, Israel. And as you know, it's customary on reaching a new season or buying a new suit of clothes or a happy occasion to also recite the Shecheanu. So let's do that. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. The English is a little hard to read there, but blessed are you, our God, creator of the universe, who has sustained us. I'll just translate it so we can't really read the English here. Who has kept us alive and sustained us and brought us to this season. So you'll notice, one of the first things I wanted to mention is that these two blessings start with Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu. We're all used to that, right? We probably don't even think about that language. But why should it be that we have blessings in this format or that we start so many prayers this way? So I'm actually going to hold that thought, and let me tell you what I plan for today, and we'll see if we have time to come back and study that, because I think that's a nice place to sort of get into the text. But before we get into the text, I thought we could talk about what the Siddur is, what we perceive it to be, what's in it, and so on, and then talk about what prayer is in Judaism, why we should do it, whether we should if we don't believe in God or the words we're saying. Is there some other purpose? Then we could talk about the structure of the service. And then finally, if we have time, the format of blessings like these and many others. And as you know, I sort of tentatively picked 90 minutes for the session, but we'll see how things go. It's an hour, fine, whatever works for everybody. And we can talk also later about whether this is a good time slot. As you know, some people are interested, but they couldn't attend today. So whether a weeknight would work better or a Sunday, I don't know, or I don't know if everybody will agree. But we can we can deal with that, I guess, off the record, if you will, as we lawyers say. I mean, usually now I'm used to somebody saying, "Now swear in the witness," and I'm not under oath, but we're all under oath in a way. Okay, so my first question, since we're here in a broader sense to talk about the Siddur, is what is it? And I have, of course, there are various versions. Here is what we call an Orthodox Siddur, although I think better to call it a traditional. Maybe this happens to be an Art Scroll Siddur, a complete Art Scroll Siddur. And I also have, these are available in different sizes and so on. But what I really like, this is also an Art Scrolls weekday Siddur, and it has the word-by-word English translation, very literal, which I find great for studying and also for improving Hebrew. So if you haven't purchased a Siddur, and by the way, Miriam at TBT has a supply of older Sim Shalom, a conservative but it has the full, I think it has full weekday and Shabbat, and she'll give them for free. So if you want one of those, stop by and ask her. But anyway, so if you are interested, I'd recommend the Art Scroll. I'll just go through a few books and then we'll go back to the discussion. I have, if you might be familiar with the Shabbat conservative Sim Shalom, there's also a weekday conservative Sim Shalom, Siddur Sim Shalom, and I really like this one as well. And then we have, of course, the Gates of Prayer Reform, all right, and the new Mishkan Tefillah.
Art, what's the difference between the conservative and reform?
Okay, so we will be talking about the differences as we go. I also wanted to point out that the Reconstructionist movement has very interesting Siddurim, Kol HaNeshama, which vary the text because there's not so much attention to God as a separate divine entity. So there are interesting variations and blessings especially. And then the final thing I wanted to just mention is, and this is probably the primary source, or a primary source that I'm going to be using. This is one book, but there's 10 volumes of this. And it's called the My People's Prayer Book series. And in it has not only the text, but a lot of commentary by different scholars, modern liturgy, historians, and it's done sort of in the format of Talmud, namely there's text and then there are comments around it. So anyway, okay, so with that introduction, let's go back to what are these books anyway? What's in a Siddur?
I think that there's a prayer for absolutely anything you might want. I mean, there's a suggested prayer for any event, occasion that happens.
Okay, I'm going to repeat a little bit because I don't know how well you're picking up on the recording. But anyway, so Marilyn, you said that you think there are prayers for every occasion.
That's what I think, yeah.
And by occasion, do you mean like weddings or?
I mean everyday stuff, everyday things, just anything that happens in your life, from day to day.
Okay. Any?
There are also prayers that vary with the seasons and the holidays. So, like, there's probably prayers for, let's see, for, what is it, the Jewish Arbor Day?
Tu B'Shvat?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Tu B'Shvat, and there would be other prayers as you vary through the seasons, because I know there's the prayer for the rain in one season and another prayer as the seasons vary.
Okay. So you've both identified prayers.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a prayer book? Is that then what it is? I mean, it's not called a prayer book. That's kind of strange. I mean, I've always referred to it as a prayer book, or Siddur, or a prayer book. But the Hebrew name isn't Sefer Tefillot, or Tefillah, or, you know.
What does Siddur translate?
Okay, so, sorry, Richard?
I said, that's the question.
So, can you think of another word that we're used to that sounds like Siddur?
Seder.
Okay, Seder. What does Seder mean? Seder means order. Okay, so Siddur comes from the same root. Okay, Sin, Daled, Resh. So apparently, whoever gave it the name or wanted to characterize what it is was concerned about its contents as fulfilling the primary function of providing some kind of order or structure. So, but is there anything else, and Marilyn, you're looking through a copy there, you can look at the table of contents, is there something else in the Siddur besides prayers? Is it something other than just orders of prayers for various occasions? Do you know? When you're in shul on Friday night, can you think of some other thing, anything else other than a prayer?
Just blessings.
Okay, blessings. How about songs?
Yes.
Okay, there's songs. Okay, and when we say prayers, where do they come from? And what's in a prayer in the Siddur? Who wrote them? You know.
Some of the prayers have their origin in Torah. The Shema has its origin in Torah.
Okay. So, go ahead, Marilyn. Yeah.
Well, looking through my book, I see that it also has instructions. I mean, it tells you what's expected or how you should behave, what you should do, how you should light the candles, who lights them, when to light them. So it's a lot of information.
And does it say it? And so, Marilyn, you're indicating that there are instructions, ritual guidelines, and things like that in the Siddur you're looking at, which is the which is an Art Scroll Women's Siddur, I see. Okay. And what does it say at the top? Because I have something similar in the back of my little volume here. Do you have a heading up at the top in that section you're looking at?
Well, it's candle lighting, Sabbath and Festival EU.
At the very top, I don't know what you're looking at, but is there a title of the chapter or the heading? Go to the very back. I think we might be looking at different places. Okay, well anyway, so mine has a whole section on laws. And there's over 100 laws. Well, for example, when to say Kaddish and when not to. Laws having to do with whether you can speak during certain prayers. All right. My point is that, and Marilyn was mentioning.
A guidebook to your life.
A guidebook to life. So, so we've got, so far we've mentioned prayers, we've mentioned sections of Torah, we've mentioned halakha, some laws. So could it be that the Siddur is something broader? The designers wanted to have some manual that was broader than just which prayer to say during a certain service. Did you find that section? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, that looks like a table of contents. I mean, if you go to the back, maybe it'll be in there. So I guess my point is that the Siddur, in one sense, is like you were saying, Richard, it's a guidebook. And as we get into it, we will discover, when we look at where the prayers come from, they come from different eras. Some are from the medieval. There's also poetry, okay? And there are many, many excerpts from Psalms. So, and when we look at the individual prayers, we'll see certain ones were added and certain ones were deleted at various times in history. So by studying the Siddur, what we really have is a form of history book, a Jewish history book, I think, which is not just events, but what Jews in various generations wanted us to know and what they thought were the most important things in their lives. And so it's a way for us to connect. The Siddur isn't just going into synagogue and saying the next prayer and wondering how long is left until the service is over. We never do that. But it's many things, and we'll talk about many things. But it's in one of the things that it is, it's a kind of compendium of Jewish philosophy, history, and law. So I guess that's what I want to start with, the idea that it is not just a prayer book. So that, for example, if you don't pray, you wouldn't say, you shouldn't have to say, I have no use for that book because I don't pray. Okay, that may be the case, but there are other things in there too. It's kind of a diary that generations of Jews before us have put together. So it is interesting to me that it's not called a book of prayer, but it has something to do with order. So we're going to talk about what the order is. But before we do that, let's go to the second general topic, because it is, after all, it is primarily a prayer book. I mean, there are other things in there, but that's the major function. So, what is prayer for Judaism? What is prayer for? Any idea? You do it sometimes. What do you do when you pray? It may not be according to the words of the Siddur, but I bet you that sometimes in your life you have uttered a prayer.
Absolutely.
And for what? What was the purpose of uttering a prayer? Let me just ask Carol. And then
I think when people are sick, I don't say a prayer per se. I just say, I hope they get well, or something like that.
Okay, so one of the things is it's an expression of a hope.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's getting closer to God. It's communicating with God.
Yeah, you seem to pray to God to heal them.
Okay, so it's a form of communication with God. So does that mean it's communicate? Where, I guess I would ask, all right, where is this God to whom we are praying? Is the God up there on the bema, you know, when we're saying the prayers in the sanctuary, but not at home? You know what? Meryl?
You know, I never quite knew or felt I knew what the purpose of prayer was until I started teaching the Saturday morning classes at Temple Beth Tikva, and it's in my teaching to the 6th grade, the 5th grade, whatever class I've had, that I've come to realize, in my opinion, gratitude for for what you have in life is so important, and a lot of us forget to be grateful. And I think that's one of the really important uses of prayer, to always remind ourselves of all the good that we have.
Okay, so Marilyn has just said that for you, prayer is primarily an expression of gratitude and a way to remind ourselves of so much that we should be grateful for. I'm not trying to recast your words. I just, so that whoever's listening and watching, make sure they got the gist of it. Okay, so and are we expressing gratitude to God? Are we just expressing it? I'm trying to flesh out a little bit whether this is still part of communicating with God, or whether there's anything else that we might be communicating.
Whether you're communicating with God or not, actually, but recognizing what you're grateful for is very helpful for you,
Okay.
for our development, and us as people.
So it might be some kind of. I'll get to you in a second, Richard. So then it might be a kind of self. I don't want to say self-centered in the egotistical sense, but a self-focused activity. That might be part of it. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. Okay, Richard, what do you think?
I think God's within us, and it's opening up a communication with somebody who's always there one way or the other.
Okay, so and Ann Newberry, hi Ann, has just joined us.
I'm late.
No problem. We're recording on the phone for anyone who wants in the future, and I'm also recording in the video for internet. Hopefully, I'll be able to post it. And we're talking right now about what prayer is. So, Richard, I'm sorry, you were saying that God is within us.
He's part of us. I mean, He's there. He's there, but this is some special times that we are closer to Him and bring Him to the surface.
Okay.
Yeah.
So God is always in us,
With
but
us,
in us.
amongst us.
So then, what if God is in us? Then why should we say a prayer? God's in us. God knows what's in us.
Because at these moments we have a need to
Express
do
it.
that.
Okay. So it's self-expression at a time of need. Okay.
It's funny because Ann and I were talking about that today, and I don't use God because I said to Ann, I said, I feel so fortunate. I said that, that I have my health and I can do things. I can still walk and move my hands, and things like that. But I don't thank God for that. I just feel fortunate.
Okay. So actually one of the things that I hope to do, I don't know, we could do it within the context of this class, or we could do it separately, is present some information on the tremendous range of Jewish views of God. Mm-hmm. Okay. Of course, when we're studying the prayers, we'll see, God is this and God is that. Very many different expressions of God, but our tradition also allows for, I think, some kind of gratitude to something outside ourselves.
But there's something else I wanted, because Richard made me think of it, because she knows what I'm talking about. But every time people refer to God, they say He.
Mm-hmm.
And that I find strange. We don't know what God is, you know, at least in my perception.
So why give
Why
that
give it-
entity a gender?
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, and the Reconstructionist prayer book and others move away from that. And I know one of my Rabbi Stan Levy, one of my teachers, was the first one to introduce me to alternating between Baruch Atah Adonai and Bracha At Adonai, or Baruch, you know. So it was very interesting. It got me thinking, and actually, as we study the prayers, I think I will point out to you that some of them are in feminine form. We don't even notice it. Especially prayers that have to do with healing. There are some attributes that are considered feminine, and where might that come from? From Kabbalah, because Kabbalah does envision masculine and feminine traits of the divine, and that there was a time in history when Kabbalah was mainstream Judaism, not like we think of it today, and it had a dramatic impact on the development of the Siddur. So we will get to prayers that are Kabbalistic, and part of that you will see is the feminine overlay, if I can be gendered about it. I mean, or emotions that are more potentially associated with that. So, but that'd be good. So let's look for that in the prayers. Okay, Marilyn?
The experience of using the prayer book, the Siddur, is very, very different as you go from one synagogue to another synagogue to another synagogue. We've been down to a Friday night service at the Reconstructionist temple. We happened to hit a musical jazz service, and it was very, very much filled with music, beautiful singing, very, very upbeat. I've also sat at Saturday morning services at the Chabad, which is a Hasidic, and it just seems to me that they take a deep breath and blow through those prayers and the Torah service. And then they end with this really interesting prayer whereby they recite what are the ingredients in the incense that was used in the temple, and then the warning that if you fail to make this potion exactly correct, you will be killed.
How lovely.
I know, isn't it though? And so the recitation of those lines has to do with prayer or communication to God or thanking God or the feeling of God for being within the individual has absolutely left me cold.
It's historical. Part of the Siddur is historical, too.
Okay, so that means then that the Siddur has accumulated prayer after prayer after prayer in its development over the course of 2,000 years, and nobody has removed anything from it.
Well, that's not...
Which means you have to recite those prayers at a breakneck speed.
Okay, so
that's good.
So I think you probably got picked up on the microphone. I hope so. But basically, you're saying that and I won't repeat. I won't do this every time. Well, actually, you know, when we play back after the first time, we'll see if it turns out that it picked up. Then wonderful. And also, the other thing is, I might get a standalone mic. Maybe you could put it at the end of the table, and you know, we're working on. I ask those who are watching and listening to. This is the first attempt to see what works and what doesn't. So a little learning curve we're on here, or I'm on anyway. But okay, so the part about the incense in the prayers is very interesting. Actually, I was at a retreat, a rabbinical retreat, a couple of weeks ago, and that's what the rabbi chose to talk about. He was lecturing the alumni. Let's study the prayers having to do with incense and what they mean. So we'll get there. It actually is. It's fascinating. I'm going to challenge your statement that nothing has ever been deleted from the Siddur. But you are right that it certainly is, as you were saying, an accumulation. And there is a resistance to taking things out, in part because it's historical and we don't want to lose things.
It's like cleaning your closets, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. But you raised another good point, and that is, you said in this synagogue you went to, they were racing through the prayers.
Not only through the prayers, but through the Torah service, with the elimination of the cantillation pattern. Now remember how both my daughters worked very, very hard to get the correct cantillation pattern down, as well as to learn the words for their Torah portion that they chanted at their bat mitzvahs. And there is very little of that.
But
It's just,
the words are enunciated clearly.
yes, they are enunciated
You
clearly.
could make out every word. I mean,
That is true. They just don't have the cantillation pattern, which in my attending of Reform services for my youth and then conservative services, I distinctly remember the cantillation pattern.
they don't say a 20-page Siddur. They just say about 20, 30 lines.
That's true.
Okay, so let me ask you
What
this.
is that cancellation pattern?
Cantillation pattern,
The trope.
that's the rising and falling
The rhythm.
of the...
To the rhythm?
The
of
rhythm.
Yeah.
Well, it's not actually, the rhythm is...
Yeah.
It's the sound pattern
Pattern.
of how you pronounce. The question is, what is cantillation?
Yeah.
And that is the pattern of how you enunciate and sing or pronounce the words, the prayers.
Basically it is.
Okay, and we'll study this, but part of the reason for cancellation is because, especially with Torah in the prayers. Remember, I don't know if you know, Hebrew is not written with vowels and not with punctuation in the Torah. And we don't necessarily know how these things were sung, what the words meant, because they can be interpreted different ways. Like in English, if you take the word PN, what word is that? Pin, pen,
Pneumatic.
pun, so about 1,000 years ago, the Masoretes, who lived in the Galilee, came up with a standardized pronunciation so that we wouldn't lose the meaning as they understood it then. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important to try and pronounce things properly, so we'll know that that is how it was intended to be said, and that was the right word. I'm not an expert in cantillation, but we can talk about that much more, and we'll study that. But I wanted to. This is a good conversation, but I want to keep us in the topic we're on, which is what is prayer. So, if the people who you are listening to are rapid fire through it, what are they accomplishing? Are they communicating with God? Are they just fulfilling a tradition? Are they expressing something internally? None of those things. What are they doing?
I agree.
Fulfilling an obligation.
Checking the box.
They're fulfilling an obligation to recite prayers A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and to chant this Torah portion with this half Torah portion.
Okay.
Because, yes, you can go ahead and pick up a book and read it in rapid fire English, but how much you actually understand of what you're reading, I've always questioned.
Okay, so we'll talk about, let's talk about one of the other things that prayer might be, if we're on the subject of what is prayer, is a way of fulfilling an obligation. And what is the source of this obligation? I ask a broader question. I think you know the answer to this. What halachically, or in Jewish law, is there an obligation to pray, and if so, why?
It's a communal prayer. It's so that you keep your members together. It's a control.
Service?
It's a control thing. It's a social mechanism. Okay, yeah. All right. I'm certainly not going to argue that that's not part of it, but I'm actually looking for something more, more foundational. The prayer service.
It's keeping tradition.
Okay, it's keeping tradition, but we're talking about obligation. Was there? Okay, let me ask you. In the Torah, are there obligations to pray? Let's just start with the Torah.
I don't know.
It say, "You shall pray."
No, it talks a lot
Okay.
about bringing the sacrifices to the temple, and I know that after the second temple fell in 70 of the Common Era, prayer was substituted for the sacrifices to the to the extent that the sacrifices were mandatory upon the people, you could by extension say that therefore prayer as a substitute for sacrifice became mandatory.
Okay, I think that's exactly right. So I would suggest that one of the reasons that traditional Jews, maybe the reason, maybe the only reason, I don't think it's the only reason, but I think the primary reason that traditional Jews pray 3 times a day or 4 times a day on Shabbat, or whether there's additional prayer, but in effect 3, is because, just what you said, there was a halakha, there was a halakhic obligation. We were supposed to bring these sacrifices. The temple was destroyed. We can't do that anymore. The rabbi said, maybe in part for communal reasons, like you said, Anne, but maybe just because there was this obligation. So we have this. We have a continuing obligation. God said, "You shall," and the rabbi said, "Well, we can't do A, so we're going to substitute B." And we can't actually go through the steps of the sacrifice, with the blood and so we're going to have instead a prescribed procedure for our services, which are in substitute of sacrifice. And that procedure is, we're actually going to look at it very shortly. We say this prayer and that prayer and that prayer and that prayer and that prayer. And when you finish those prayers, you are what's called Yotzei, meaning you are fulfilled your obligation. You're out of the obligation to have, we could say, done the sacrifice, or we could say, done the service. And so if you do it every day of your life, you know it pretty well, and yes, you can do it really fast. And, okay, so it wasn't as emotionally fulfilling, perhaps, but you did what God, as understood by the rabbis, commanded you to do. And you said it really fast, and you said each word, but you fulfilled your obligation.
Women are exempt from that obligation then, because women are exempt from all time-sensitive obligations. And one of those is to attend the house of prayer and to pray. Because a woman at home with her children, unable under the traditional way of looking at things, to go to shul until her youngest child was able to walk there, would not ever be able to attend.
Okay.
And that includes on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So a woman has no obligation then under that kind of way of looking at it to pray. Correct?
Okay, I'm just suggesting that fulfilling an obligation is one of the functions of prayer, and perhaps one even could say traditionally the most important function, or a most important function of prayer. So I'm not going to answer your question right now because I want to stick with these different functions of prayer. Okay, now and I actually I've got some more stuff that I want to talk about in this subject, because it's obviously we're going to be spending those, if you continue with this, the whole psychology of prayer is crucial to our project here. Let me ask you a really fundamental question. What separates humans from animals, if anything? Are humans different qualitatively than whatever the smartest animal is? I don't know if that's a chimpanzee or dolphin or elephant or the wise old owl. Whatever the smartest animal is a human just the most intelligent at the top of the evolutionary chain? Or is there some, and actually I'm not asking you, I'm interested in your personal opinion, but we're really here to study, so far as we can, what the Jewish view of these things is. So does Judaism postulate that humans, should I say Homo sapiens, I would say men, the human animal, that's an interesting expression, are different qualitatively in some way. And if there's a difference, what is it? And I'm talking about this in the context of prayer. So, what is it that makes humans different according to Judaism?
They have souls.
But we like to think we're better. More advanced.
Okay, and what do you mean by, Mel? You said
We need
we
a
have
six-part
you
we need
have
a six-part
souls.
session on that.
What can you summarize that in a paragraph?
No, not really. That's,
Okay.
Morals.
Morals. Okay, so I think Mel is exactly so. Judaism, not so. I would change your statement in one way, Mel. I wouldn't say that Judaism says that people have souls. I think Judaism would say people are souls. We are souls with bodies. We're not bodies with souls. The essence of a human is their nefesh, their soul. And it's the soul that seeks to connect with other souls, with God, however we understand God, with the universe. And so if one accepts that, then prayer becomes a soul function. Okay, now let me add something to this. Okay. So how do you say prayer in Hebrew?
Tefillah.
Tefillah. Okay. And what if you've studied Hebrew, you know that when you're like me, when you're constantly wrestling with studying more Hebrew, you see a word that you don't know, and the way you try to figure it out is by looking at the root. Okay. And the root of tefillah is Pei Lamed Lamed. So we have to figure out, what does that root mean? And what do you think the root Pei Lamed Lamed means in Hebrew? Okay. Well, does it mean to pray? No. Does it mean to communicate? No. It means to judge, to clarify, to decide, to differentiate. The exercise of judgment in terms of making a distinction to decide one thing or another in Hebrew is pliyah. The word pliyit is used in Exodus for a court of law. So this root has something to do with evaluating, making distinctions, deciding between one thing and another, the right thing and the wrong thing. Okay. So that's the root. So now we take what has the word tefillah, or actually, when we say I pray, in Hebrew it's mitpalel, which is reflexive. Or lahit palel is to pray. So the word in Hebrew to pray grammatically has a reflexive prefix. So in Judaism, to pray actually means to judge yourself, to use your powers of evaluation and analysis and distinguishing. Okay? It's fascinating. You'd think it might mean to communicate with God, right? But it doesn't. It means self-knowledge, self-discernment, self-evaluation. Okay, so if you take the concept that we are souls, happen to have bodies, but we're souls, and that praying is evaluating or discerning, then the purpose of prayer in the Jewish view becomes this exercise of soul analysis. And that's really what prayer is to be. It's the soul talking to itself, if you will, or making determinations. It's self-evaluation. The Siddur Avodat Halev, which means service of the heart, says, prayer is the soul's yearning to define what truly matters and to ignore the trivialities that often masquerade as essential.
Which is a huge tie-in to what you're going to do next week.
Ah. And Marilyn said, I'm going to tie into it. I'm going to thank you very much for that entree. Yeah, Marilyn says, it's a tie into what I'm going to do next week. Next week, I'm starting a Musar workshop, Practical Ethics, Everyday Holiness, which is the title that Alan Marinis, who's a modern founder of the popular movement, calls it, Everyday Holiness. And you're absolutely right. So the idea of what we do in praying is raising the level of the prayer, the soul that is doing the praying. And because of that, when I think about such questions as, well, should rational people pray? What if they don't believe in God? Okay. If you approach prayer as the need to get to the place of self-honesty, then I don't want to say that fulfilling the commitment, the halachic commitment to say the prayers is not important, but I mean there's a place for everybody, I think, to pray, even if we only consider it this idea of stopping the busyness of the world, going inside yourself, and really thinking about where you want to be and having self-expression.
And Mark,
yeah.
you could perhaps achieve that same effect by reading poetry. And perhaps you might even be able to find some sort of a deeper meaning in the poetry than in chanting the instructions for incense.
Okay, so I would even say that maybe what you're saying, would it be fair to say, Marilyn, that what art, and I'm not an expert or know much of anything about art, I'm not saying my name, but isn't the art appreciation also a way of expressing or exploring a soul? So you even could say that poetry, music, literature, all these things are ways to elevate our souls and get in touch with some deeper truth. Okay, but Judaism says that we should read poetry, and we have poetry in our Siddur, and maybe that's one of the reasons that poetry is in the Siddur, because it's a way for our souls to elevate. Yes, Richard.
That stack of books shows multiple ways of trying to achieve the same thing.
Multiple ways of trying, so and I think that's one of the reasons the Siddur has changed, because generations of Jewish sages have said, let's put this poem, historical reference, biblical quotation that is somehow responds to our situation into the Siddur to help us accomplish this. I remember I studied in Jerusalem with, or I heard, he's the head of the institution, but Rabbi David Hartman at the Shalom Institute. He gave a lecture one time, and he said, he talked about prayer, and he said the purest form of prayer is meditation, and ideally we should all, it'd be good to do it as a community, it's not necessary, but ideally we would just go into the sanctuary and be silent for an hour. Why do we need to say anything? God knows what we're saying, what we're feeling. We don't need to be God's recording secretaries. I remember he said that. Okay, but the truth is, we're not. Many of us, most of us, aren't that skilled in meditation. So we need some guided meditation, and maybe that's what the Siddur. Another way to look at the Siddur is it's a historical form of guided meditation for us. And if you could do it by studying poetry, and that's the way, there's the communal issue, but for yourself, if you can attain that by poetry, then wonderful. Now I say that without acknowledging that, and we'll study as we go through the service, we'll see that the rabbis had certain emotions in mind. And the service actually is kind of a stair step where we feel, if we can, we're supposed to feel certain things. This is like a symphony. When the symphonist, a conductor or the what do you call it? Someone who writes a symphony, a composer, puts. I think the composers. Well, I want this music to be like this because I want the people to feel a certain emotion, and then I'm going to have the music go faster, slower, higher, lower, louder, softer, whatever, because I'm manipulating, in the good sense, the emotions of the listeners, and that's also what the Siddur does. So I'm not sure just reading a poem fulfills that objective. But
I was going to say, where does music fit into this? Because it evokes certain emotions, in people.
Okay, so there is, as we were talking about, there's a nusach. A nusach is a musical theme. And just for example, it's very different for the daily service than for Shabbat. So even when we say the Amidah, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu. Well, in daytime it's Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Eloheinu. Okay, so that and different, and the high holidays are different.
Lamentations.
Okay, right. So different holidays have different musical themes, and we call it a nusach. So one of the things that when I went to school, we also have a cantorial department, and they're learning all this, how to, because the different musical character of different services. So they really, a trained cantor really has to learn a tremendous amount, not just the prayers, but because the cantor, I'll just mention this traditionally, we're often used to the rabbi leading the service. That's not the traditional way. The rabbi is the teacher. The rabbi is not the prayer leader. The prayer leader is the shaliach tzibur, the messenger of the community, and that's the cantor, the prayer leader. And how does the cantor, the chazan, do that? Through music. So you're absolutely right. It's the music that is supposed to carry the community's emotions and to God. And then the rabbi gets up at a certain time and teaches. Okay, so we don't. That's not the way. If you go to, I know a lot of conservative shuls are more toward the traditional. The rabbi will sit in the back, maybe call out the page number, but it's members of the community or the cantor who leads the service. And then when it comes to the Torah service, the rabbi will give a drash. Okay, so anyway, okay. So let's see, we're at about 52 minutes, so we can. I don't want to stop the prayer. I guess what I'm saying is the two other things I was thinking of doing today would be to get into the structure of the service, and we could talk about the structure of blessings. The structure of blessings is a shorter unit. So first, let me suggest, let's make sure that we're done with the idea of what prayer is, if we felt like we've explored that adequately initially. And if so, then let's take a look at the structure of the blessing, just as get our toes wet a little bit. And then if you want to keep going, we could start looking at the structure of the service, or we could wait until next time. So let's start with the prayer. Anybody want to say anything else about what prayer is? Do you agree, disagree? Is it more complicated than you thought? What about the idea that prayer is self-examination? Is that, do you agree, disagree?
What's that?
That's my refrigerator.
Oh,
compressor.
okay.
Sorry.
It's making nice tears.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
It probably is the water. Okay, so does that change in any way? If that's the correct primary view of what it means to pray, we also have this as being the obligation and communicating with God. But if the primary idea is self-examination, does that change your view of what the Siddur is? What's the Siddur if the primary function of prayer is mit palel, self-examination? What does that make the Siddur then?
Totally, it totally changes my perception. And not when I think about it, and I think like just of the prayers that we read every Friday night, a lot of them are reminding us of what our obligations are, and I suppose we should be thinking about, have I fulfilled them this week?
Anybody else? So maybe the Siddur is a toolkit. It's a self-help book. Instead of going to or online, you can go to the bookstore now. Instead of getting a self-help book, we can say we've got a 2,000-year-old plus compendium of what the rabbis thought we should be thinking about, saying, singing, whatever, to help us help ourselves.
Well, we talked about it as a manual. So.
Yeah, a manual. So I think for me that puts a very different light on it. And I don't say the traditional service every morning, but I do it most days. And I honestly don't do it. The days I do it, I don't do it because I feel I have to fulfill the mitzvah. I do it for a lot of reasons, the tradition, because I learn. But I do it most of all because I feel something, and it does make me think. And if I don't do it because I'm busy or whatever, then I miss having spent that time thinking about myself and what I should be thinking about. And especially in the morning blessing, we haven't yet talked about what order we want to discuss the service, because we've got some options. But one of the things that I love about some of the beginning parts of the service are they are highly reflective. Help me to get through today by doing this and that. Keep evil people away from me today. I mean, there's stuff like that in there in the very beginning, that even if I don't do the Shema or the Amidah, I want that sort of grounding for the day. It helps me.
The basics.
The basics. Yeah. Well, we can. Those were added later, so whether they're the basics. All right. So, would you rather talk about the form of the blessing, or would you rather I distribute the service outline and we can spend a little time just talking about what's in the basic service? Who wants to do what's in a blessing? That should take us 10 minutes or less.
Okay.
And who wants to do what's in a service? Blessing, service. Blessing.
Then it'll be finished.
Okay, that'll allow us. That'll be a little unit, and then we can. Okay, so next time, then we'll look at what's in the service, and if we have time, then we'll talk about the history of the Siddur. Where did all this stuff come from, and what before there was a Siddur? What did Jews do? Even those who weren't sacrificing at the time. Were there other things? What if you were in a synagogue? I mean, synagogues are old. There were synagogues other places than Jerusalem before the temple was destroyed. What were they doing in those places? What were Jews doing in those places? How were they praying? Okay, so in the rest of the time we have today, yes, Richard.
We're talking about prayer as looking inward. How does that relate to the sense of community that the temple brings together the community, and we typically do this together?
Okay, so
that's the current tradition.
Richard's question is, how do we do I understand? How do you reconcile the meet Palel, self-reflective, meditating, reading poetry, or doing whatever with we're supposed to be in a community, or at least traditionally? We have a prayer in a minyan, right? Okay, did you want to understand, Mel?
I thought that the answer to that question has a lot to do with the fact that the Kaddish, in order to say the Kaddish, there has to be at least 10 people there, 10 adults. And that's why the community is required, otherwise I'm not so sure it is.
Okay, so Marilyn said, don't we? I thought you had to have a community to say at least certain prayers like the Kaddish. Anybody want to respond to that? No. Okay, so I will. So you're right, Marilyn. The tradition says that certain prayers must be said in a minyan. What are those prayers? Those are prayers that are, like you said, the Kaddish is one, the Baruch Hu is another. Okay, and those are prayers that are considered to be mostly or primarily directed at talking to God as a community. God said, I will dwell among you as a community. The Torah talks about God saying that. And we actually, maybe we should wait until we get to the Baruch Hu to get into this in more detail. But let's just say that the Talmud addresses what's a community. God said, I want to dwell among you as a community. The rabbi said, well, if we need to be a community, what does that mean? And how many people does that constitute? And that ended up through an analysis which actually has to do with the number of scouts that went to Canaan and gave bad reports. It's very interesting how they got there. But yes, the short answer is there are certain prayers that halachically are only said in a community, which traditionally is 10 men or 10 people. Okay, so what about all these other prayers then? Aren't we talking to God? So maybe the answer is that certain prayers are really talking to God, and those need to be said in a community, halachically. But the vast majority of prayers are expressions we talk about God, maybe, to ourselves, but we're not actually talking to God. That's a possible explanation that we don't need to. But we'll delve into that when we get to the Baruch Hu. But obviously, Judaism does say you can recite most blessings, most prayers, not in a minyan.
Where do we come up with the 10? I mean, where
well, that's what I'll get to that. That has to do with the number of spies in the report and God. We talk about evil community, and the rabbis. Well, how many is an evil community? Well, then how many is a good community? And I guess in the Talmud. All right. So actually, Barbara, who's in another room, has my handouts. Richard, would you mind just asking Barbara for the handouts? She should be in the other room, either upstairs and then we can talk about the blessings. So while Richard is getting those, I heard the stairs creaking, so I think she might be upstairs. But all right, so we have this familiar form of a blessing. What is it? Baruch atah. Baruch atah. V'tzivanu, blah blah blah, whatever it is. Okay, and so is this somewhere in Torah? Okay, is it somewhere else in the Bible? I mean, where did this interesting formula come from? And why do we use it? And why doesn't it say God is great? I don't know anything about Islam, but do their blessings start Allah Akbar or some other formulation maybe? Okay, so and I don't know whether Christians, has anybody know? Do Christians have a formulaic prayer? Is she? No, Barbara. Okay.
She's asleep.
All right, and then hold on 1 second, and I'll go look up there in the bedroom, and I'll be right back.
I didn't want to knock on doors.
I think there's a big difference.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that there's a big difference between the experience of a service between Reconstructionist, Reform,
very much so.
Conservative,
Oh, definitely.
and Orthodox.
Shouldn't it be whatever works best for you?
What?
Shouldn't you find
Exactly.
what works best for us?
Exactly. For example, the Orthodox.
That's the ideal anyway.
Yes, the Orthodox have a prayer that probably originated, 1,500, 2,000 years ago, that praises God for not having made me a man. Now, that has been eliminated a long time ago. I mean, a woman, excuse me, for not having made me a woman. Made me a woman.
Okay.
It's been eliminated a long time ago because of its obvious anti-woman bias.
But you still know about it.
Well, of course, because it's in the
All right.
it's in the prayer.
So would you pass these down? I'll give you one side here. And I'll hold one up for the camera. I'm passing out a 2-page sheet. It's just 2 pages. No. It's not stapled, but there are 2 pages. They're sets. So bring them back.
Okay, here's a set. There's for you.
Okay, these are sets. Sorry, Barbara ran out of staples, which is a problem.
Okay,
That's why she didn't bring them out. Also, okay, you should have 2 sheets.
No, we only have one, and some doesn't have any. I don't have any.
Okay, let's start with the sets, and we'll see if we have enough.
Okay, the set. Here's a set.
There's another set.
Here's a set, Mel.
There's a set.
Okay, we have.
And I just want to save one for me.
Oh, there you go.
One for me.
Oh, wait a
Okay,
minute.
here's a set.
Here.
Okay, does anybody not
Okay,
have?
Then this is a set. This is a complete set.
Okay,
Okay, we
everybody,
All right.
is everybody set with a
I think
set?
we're all set with this set.
All set with a set. Okay, so this is not going to be usable on the video. So what I'll do is, anybody who is looking at this and would like to get a copy, I will be happy to email it to you. But this is what we're going to be using right now. The title is Basic Structure of a Blessing. And you see I've put the text on the left and the source in the middle and a little comment on the right. So let's start with Baruch Atah Adonai. And my first question, and I actually have the answer written here, so can't surprise you. But what does the word, okay, Baruch, we've heard that translated typically as blessed, right? Blessed are you, Adonai. Baruch Atah Adonai. But this word Baruch, now it's definitely in the grammatical form of, how do we say it in English? The past possessive. I'm not sure if I don't remember my syntax, whatever. Blessed is a past participle. Okay, thank you. So we know that much, but the actual root, we're talking about looking at Hebrew roots to try to discover what a word means. This, and I have it written over here in the bottom right on the comments of that first section there. The root meaning of these letters is knee or elbow. So how do you get from knee or elbow to the idea of blessed? Or I can tell you when we say the Baruch Hu, in the translation we used to use from the Gates of Prayer, it said praised.
Is that why Islam gets on its knees? Is this the reason?
Well, I don't know if it could. I don't know the answer. The question was: is that why Muslims, when they pray, get on their knees? I mean, so clearly, when you get on your knees, it's an expression of humility, right? So I can't speak to Islam, but I would say that yes, that they're doing it as a form of humility. And similarly, this idea that this root comes from knees does suggest that we are in some way, when we say Baruch Atah Adonai, we are expressing some form of acknowledgement, some form of subservience, or
Don't we bow?
I'm sorry?
When
we say Baruch Atah Adonai, okay, no, you raise a good point. So let's get that in a second. What do we do something with our bodies when we say this? Yeah, Carol?
So do the Catholics. They get on their knees. They have a bar.
A kneeler.
Yeah, and they get on their knees.
Okay, now I don't know whether they do that because I'm not familiar with the service, the Christian service.
They do. They get on their knees when they pray.
Okay. So But you raise a really good point, and that is, and we do this, we don't, usually we're sitting in the pew when we say most of the blessings. During the Amidah, when we say Baruch Atah Adonai, we actually bend our knees at Baruch, and then stand up, Baruch Atah, and then we lean forward, stand up with Adonai. So we're acting out this idea of a knee or bending or paying respect or whatever. Okay, so the word Baruch is actually fascinating. It's also related to the word for a stream. So there's a sense of, or very close to, so there's a sense that Baruch Baruch Atah Adonai is acknowledging the source of blessings as if it's a running stream, a stream of blessings that we get. You were saying earlier, Marilyn, that we should be so grateful for all the blessings in our life. So there's this sense of Baruch Atah Adonai is acknowledging, tapping in somehow to this stream, ever-running stream of blessings. Okay, where is it? We haven't answered, where does the language actually come from? And in Psalm 119, we see the phrase Baruch Atah Adonai, and it says, Lam Deni Chukecha, train me in your laws. And as I say in my comments here, the Psalm 119 is actually an incredible psalm. It's very long, 176 verses. Wow. But it has all sorts of wonderful things in it, and is a major source of liturgical themes, including Baruch Atah Adonai. Okay, so that's one source of where we get it. So it's not in Torah, but it is in Tanakh. It is in the Bible, namely in Psalm 119. This beginning of the formula that the rabbis selected as our main vehicle for liturgical blessings. We have something similar in another place. That's why I have it listed twice there. In the book of Chronicles, which is at the end of Tanakh, we have the statement, Vavarech David et Adonai. So, and David blessed Adonai, le'enei kol hakachal, in the presence of the whole community. Va'omer David Baruch Atah Adonai, and he said, whatever this word means, blessed, praised, we acknowledge you, something like that. You, Adonai, Elohei Yisrael, God of Israel, Avinu, our Father, Me'olam ve'ad olam, forever and ever. Okay, so that's a second place where this formula appears. And Rabbi David Ellenson, who is, I don't know if he still is, but I think he still is, head of the Hebrew Union College. Also, I studied with him at Shalom Hartman Institute, also in Jerusalem. And he wrote in this book, Shema and Blessings, I referred to. He's one of the commentators. He said that God is envisioned personally. So we're referring to, we're Baruch Atah Adonai. This is individually we are addressing God as if God was, I won't say a person, but we're saying you. So it's, it's an immediate communication with something or someone. We're calling you, but also as a being who is blessed, irrespective of any act of the part of humans. From this latter perspective, Rabbi Ellenson says, to say blessed is to acknowledge the metaphysical majesty of God. So whatever metaphysical means, whatever we imagine God to be, we are acknowledging as part of Baruch Atah Adonai. So all these things are happening in these three words.
Does the word you in Hebrew, which is atah here, vary from the masculine to the feminine?
Yes, it's
How
at.
about-
Feminine is at.
How about singular to plural?
Yes. Plural would be atem for either men or men and women together, and aten for plural women. So it is masculine. But having said that, in Hebrew, the default is masculine form. So, it's like we in English, can drop into he rather than saying he/she or it. There isn't an it in form. We don't have, many languages do. German does.
A neuter form, yes.
But we don't have that. Hebrew doesn't have that. So, you can read into it that it's masculine. It shouldn't be, or you could just say, well, there wasn't a generic way to do it, so they picked one of them. Okay. Melech HaOlam. This actually says Malech HaOlam. So I think I picked that out of a prayer that had that in there. So Melech HaOlam, sovereign of the world or universe. Where does that come from? It comes again from a different Psalm, 146:10. And this one you are familiar with because it's part of another part of the liturgy. Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elochayich Tzion ledor vador, hallelujah. I could sing it, you'd be more familiar, but maybe the word isn't familiar. So it's a little different form. Yimloch means either he rules or he will rule. In Hebrew, the future and the conditional are the same form. So it could mean he will rule or may he rule. May God rule forever. Elohai Zion, that's feminine. Now that's interesting. Okay, so the masculine form would be Elohecha. That'd be your God. But this is Elohayich, feminine, your God. Zion, Ledor Vador, hallelujah. So here we have Yimloch, masculine, and Elohayich, Zion. Now Zion is feminine. So the reason here, I think, is grammatical, talking about the speaker is speaking to the feminine Zion, and so saying your God and using the feminine form of your God. Okay, does that make sense? So I don't think it's not the feminine form of God, it's the feminine form of you for yours, feminine possessive. And then olam means, as you see in the comment, it can mean everywhere, always, eternity. And then on the second page, point out that this also appears in a different psalm, the form, the idea of melech le'olam, or melech ha'olam. So Adonai Lama Bul Yashav V'Yeshev Adonai Melech Le'olam. The Lord sat enthroned at the flood. The Lord sits enthroned, King forever. First is past tense, then present tense. So we have this idea of sovereignty as embedded in the structure of the blessing. And then Asher Kiddushanu, who has sanctified us. What does sanctified mean? In English, what does it mean to be sanctified?
To make holy.
Okay, to be made holy. So we're saying, and how do we know that? Where do we get this from? Well, here now we do look to Torah, and it's actually in many different places in Torah where God is saying, "You're a holy people. You are to be a holy people. Do the holy thing." So here are two examples. And I'm sorry that the words in Hebrew run together a little bit. I had a formatting problem. So, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael va'amarta alehem kidoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. So, speak to the entire assemblage or congregation, people of Israel, and tell them that they are to be holy because I, your God, am holy. And then in another place in Exodus 22:30, it says, "Va'anshe kodesh tehiyun li," you be a holy people to me. And then finally, the last little part of the formula, mitzvotav v'tzivanu, sanctified us how? With his commandments, and commanded us, and then whatever it is at the end of the blessing. And how do we know that we've been commanded? Well, of course, in the V'ahavta and in many other places in Torah, there are statements. The example here in Deuteronomy 6:6, V'hiyu hadevarima ela asher anochi mitzavcha. As part of the V'ahavta, so I command you these words, or these things that I say, I command you. And of course, mitzvot comes from commandments, the whole form of mitzvah, plural mitzvot. So the rabbis took, put together from different places, from different psalms, from different places in Torah, this composite, and they created this structure as a formula that we use to say blessings. And that blessing is the primary way in the Siddur that we do this mitpalel business, this self-examination. And so the idea, every single, so the idea is every single time, and you know how many times you're supposed to say this? Like, Marilyn, how many times are we supposed to say a blessing? A day?
A day, what is it, 100 times?
100 times, right? 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the daily service and all the three services and the times that you eat, are structured so that if you say the services and you say the Birkat Hamazon or the other blessings after you eat, you get to 100. I mean, it's not just try to get to 100. No, it's if you do what you're, traditionally supposed to do, then there it is. Okay. But for our purposes, at least whenever you do say a blessing, this is sort of the first substantive idea, is think about these themes. The blessedness of God, the humility, the gratitude, the God's sovereignty, the fact that we are sanctified, we're to be holy, and we're commanded to comply with the mitzvot, and then a certain thing. All that is in that formula that takes, 5 seconds to say. That's embedded in that.
Maybe we make this clear. Do you do this every day?
I eat every day, and I always say blessings before I eat. And there are other things, like there's a restroom prayer. You can go on my website, and I talk about that, which is very interesting. It's also posted in the bathroom if you want to use the bathroom. So yes, I would say that as a matter of course, I say this, numerous times a day. And if I say the morning blessings, the prayers, then I do it, several dozen more times. And if I do a full service, then then we're getting up there. I don't know if I ever do 100, but I'm certainly over 40, 50 every day, I think. And I'm supposed to be thinking about blessings I get, God's sovereignty, the need to be holy, all those things every time I do it. That's at least the idea.
Did you always do this?
No, I didn't always do this. Yeah, this came to me. It's like I didn't wear a kippah until the first day of rabbinical school. Oh. And the rabbi said, Art, we have a custom here, at least when you're here, wearing a kippah. So I can loan you one if you don't have one. And I happen to have one in my car. So I went out in the car and got it and put it on. And I decided from that, this was January 2nd, 2005. And since then, I've worn it virtually full time. Really? So that's now 7 years. Okay. So.
Do you sleep with it on?
I don't sleep with it on.
Thank God.
Do I have to tell the whole world on the internet all these?
Why not?
Maybe I can edit this part out.
Orthodox do sleep with it on.
What?
The ultra-Orthodox sleep
Okay.
with it on.
Well, I guess so. I guess I could have had a nightcap. I could stick it under there. And I actually have worn it in the shower a couple of times, but that's because I forgot to take it off.
Because it got wet.
So, okay. So we're now at an hour and almost 25 minutes. So I think we can call it there. Now, traditionally, I don't have this prepared for you. Maybe we'll do it in the future. But the tradition was at the end of a study session to say a form of Kaddish. You know, most people think of Kaddish as
For the dead.
right, but the Kaddish, of course, you know from if you read it in English, it doesn't say anything about the dead. It's a glorification of God and a wish that God's sovereignty will exist in the whole world, you know, soon, and that's one of the major themes in there. So there are different forms of the Kaddish, which we'll find when we go through the service, and one of them is the rabbi's Kaddish, and it has a paragraph that talks about learning, and may all the people who are here learning, you know, be blessed, and so on and so on. And so that would be the tradition, but we'll consider doing that in the future.
What does Kaddish mean then?
Okay, so the word.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll end with that thought. The question is, what does Kaddish mean? So rather than just telling you straight out, can you think of any other words that you might be familiar with that sound familiar? Okay, Friday night when we drink the wine and we say a blessing, you know what that's called? Kiddush. Okay, and the word, one of the ways that we refer to Shabbat is Shabbat Kodesh. Okay, so there we have three words: Kiddush, Kodesh, Kaddish, that are all from the same root.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and so holy. Okay, so the idea of Kaddish, Kiddush is holy.
Oh.
And how do we make something holy? Yeah, we separate it from what's not holy into the holy and the profane. Profane could just mean normal or secular or usual. It doesn't have to mean dirty. It just means you have the holy and the non-holy. And so the Kaddish is a form of acknowledging God's holiness. Okay? So with that, thank you very much. And we're going to, God willing, we'll do this again in 2 weeks. After we sign off, we can talk about the timing and the dates and so on. And then just remind you, next week at the same time, will be the first session of the Everyday Holiness. Thank you for the segue about the Kadosh. We'll be talking about practical ethics and Musar, and that'll be more of a workshop. We'll be taking themes, and we'll be exploring how they affect our lives and keeping records for ourselves, kind of a form of prayer, I guess. And hopefully that'll all tie in, those practical ethics and saying the blessings, and this will all become very fulfilling, I hope. So I'll end the